and some more challenging news. Salvation is available to everybody, but it's a narrow gate. That first reading sets the stage for us. But to understand it, you really need to get a sense of where these verses that were just read for us come from. They come at the very end of the book of the prophet Isaiah. And what has happened is all of the people have been taken off into exile and have now returned from exile to Palestine. What have they found? They found ruin. The temple was destroyed. Jerusalem destroyed. And the people have now worked very hard, and they have rebuilt everything. And now we get this word from God, that now that you've rebuilt it, now we go out and invite everybody here. Now it's no longer about just being Jewish. It's not just about being the chosen people anymore. God has opened the gates of Jerusalem. And now everyone will come in. That's the final message of Isaiah. That the God of the Jewish people, the God of the covenant, is now recognized as the God of all. And that salvation comes to all. Not just to a select group. Jesus kind of picks that up. And as Father Jerry said last week, he's still kind of bowling the googly. You know, it says he's passing through towns and villages. He's teaching all the time. He's got to be tired. And what we're told is that someone asks. In Hebrew, the word is mishahu. Someone, somebody, some undeterminate person. Not one of the disciples necessarily, just somebody. And he asks, how many will be saved? Kind of like sometimes when people come to the door and tell us that 144,000 have been saved. He wants a number. And Jesus answers, and the way we can tell from his answer, he's got a few things he wants to say. Salvation is not going to come because we belong to a special group. Salvation comes because ultimately at that final judgment, we walk through that narrow gate all by ourselves. All by ourselves. And just as Isaiah was telling the Jewish people, you can no longer say that God is limited to us. God now is open to all, and we recognize that now. Jesus is saying the same thing. You can't find salvation just because you say you're part of the chosen people. Let me put it in a little more contemporary terms. You can't just find salvation because you say, but God, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic, I'm good. Let me in. And Jesus is saying, not that simple. To get the idea of a narrow gate, if any of you have ever traveled to the Holy Land and ever seen a narrow gate, you know what I'm talking about. A narrow gate isn't the size of our front doors here. A narrow gate is barely big enough for a single person to walk through. And usually you've got to turn sideways to get through it and duck. That's a narrow gate. And Jesus is saying we go through that. We go through it individually. And as I was thinking about this image, I thought, what can I find here to talk about this? And the only two things I could think of were Disneyland and the airport. I mean, wherever you have massive groups of people coming into a place, but ultimately what do you have to do at the airport? Thousands upon thousands and thousands and thousands of people. But before you can get on that plane, you got to go all by yourself, shoeless, beltless, and baggageless through that narrow gate, or you're not going anywhere. And that comes pretty close to what Christ is telling us. Try to go through the narrow gate, and it's tough. It's not about what group we belong to that will help us through. We can't say, I'm with that tour group, let me in. No, we have to give up. We have to let things go. We have to make ourselves vulnerable to others. We are responsible to others. And only then, when we are basically down to nothing, do we go through that narrow gate. And that's what Christ is telling us in this gospel. It's not about when you got in line. It's not about how you got in line. It's not any of that. It's that ability to go in and face Almighty God all by yourself and say, I did what you called me to do to the best of my ability, Lord. Salvation is available to everyone, but we all go through that narrow gate. How are we doing at preparing for that narrow gate? Do we give things away? Do we make ourselves vulnerable to the needs of others? They've called our flight. You've got your boarding pass. Time to head to the gate.